So thanks for coming. I'm Thiago. I'm one of the co-founders of Tansy. I'm VP of Growth of Moondance Labs, which is the DevCo building Tansy protocol. And I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit more about our framework and our product and everything. So just to give some context, right? So Tansy, Appchain is like, this is relatively like a new term, so to say. Back a few years ago, we only have a few projects building in the Appchain space, right? But as you can see, now it's really a thing, right? So developers, teams, they all want Appchains, right? We saw a very big growth in the last years. And I can say that pretty much every environment has its own version of Appchains, right? Even in here, we have the rollups, which are not exactly the same, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But it's also like a self-standing structure instead of a shared environment, right? That's what we are more used to. And I'm going to explain what I mean about that. So why Appchains, right? Why people want Appchains? So it's super interesting to have your own chain, right? You can leverage a bunch of interesting features. So you have dedicated block space, you have, customizability, interoperability, a bunch of stuff. But it's actually very challenging to implement app chains, right? So first, you have to bootstrap your own infrastructure, your own nodes, and then you have to source liquidity, right? You have to have people staking on these nodes to have security in the chains. And then how do I connect to other chains? The world is multi-chain, right? So how do I connect to other chains? How do I interact and exchange assets, exchange messages, and everything? This is also another challenge. And finally, if you have to implement all of that yourself, it's not only expensive, but it also takes time, right, to solve all of that. So I'm introducing here then Tansy. Actually, we introduced Tansy about 1 year ago. The first public presentation about Tansy was about 1 year ago. Francisco was doing that, our CEO. And it wasn't Decoded, so it's super good to come back and show some evolutions and everything. But for those who don't know our framework yet, that's how it works more or less. And a way that I use to explain Tansy, like what Tansy does, right? Tansy does this line over here, right? Pretty much. So the way we work, it's not correct to say that we are deploying app chains on top of Tansy, right? So Tansy is an orchestration layer, and Tansy is orchestrating the block productions of other chains. So chains these app chains, these parachains, these container chains, there are many different names for more or less the same thing. So these chains, they don't run on top of Tansy, they run in parallel to Tansy. And Tansy use this infrastructure to coordinate the block production of these chains. So with our framework, it's super interesting because we reduced a lot the time to launch your chain, right? So that's a screenshot of our app, right? We have 2 different types of chains currently. So either you can deploy a Snap app chain or a dedicated app chain. So the dedicated app chain is usually for teams more developed and more down the road, and the Snap app chains are more experimentation method, right? So the Snap app chains are like dischargeable. So you just deploy your chain, make your test. Maybe you want to deploy a smart contract on top of that. Maybe you want to do some changes in the runtime, whatever. But that's it. You go there, deploy in 10 minutes, do your test, and then you let it die. After 48 hours inactive, the chain is going to be automatically decommissioned, and that's it. For a dedicated environment, then we have a more complex environment, right? So that's an environment where you can test, for instance, XCM calls, like interoperability with other chains. And that's more like a long-lasting environment to test like your more advanced features, right? Oops, yeah. So this is a little bit of our ecosystem these days, right? So it has been growing very fast, significantly, which is actually like, as we said in the beginning, right? Developers, they want app chains, right? So that shows a little bit the dimension of all of that, right? So we have gaming, we have RWA, DeFi in general, but a lot of RWA applications as well, Deepin, even AI, SocialFi, digital identity. So it's a bunch of stuff going on. And yeah, we are growing like very, very fast. Just to put some numbers, yeah, we have the basic, use case is DeFi, gaming as well, but we have a bunch of other stuff. In total, we have already deployed over 2,000 chains, right? And that ranges from, individual developers, students, or even very advanced projects as well, enterprises. It's a bunch of different types of profiles. But essentially, like it's a bunch of inbound leads already coming as well. And yeah, it's super interesting to see the growth. And I will highlight also this, right? So this number here is super interesting. So a bunch of new teams to Polkadot. So actually, when we are pitching Tansy, we talk about Appchains. We don't even mention Polkadot, which is great, right? So no one wants to use, I used to say that no one subscribe Netflix because they use Oracle database or whatever, right? It just works. It just fits your demand, and that's awesome. I think Web3 is going to really get successful when we stop to talk about the underlying tech, right, and just talk about the features and everything. So that's super interesting to see. A bunch of new projects coming, super exciting, and wanting to build the app chains. And then let's have like a deep dive in a few use cases, right? So Kona Finance is a very interesting use case. I'm based in Brazil, and this team is also based in Brazil. So what they are doing, they are creating a decentralized cross-border credit marketplace, right? Very focused in short-term credit. So in Brazil, it's very common to have buy now and pay later, right? So if you want to buy a TV, for instance, you just buy that in installments, right? So you split in 10, 12 installments, so 10 equal payments. And that's a very common business in Brazil. That's actually 1/3 of Brazilian GDP to discount this type of receivables, right? The Brazilian financial market is very sophisticated. We have a bunch of fintechs, a bunch of even registry entities, centralized registry entities, all API enabled and everything. We have 24/7 settlement methods and everything. So these guys, they are using all this framework that already existed, but they are bringing this to Web3, leveraging their own chain. So Kona is providing this architecture, right? So they created their own Oracle. It's not a service. It's only for their own activity. And what this Oracle does is that they check these installments, these receivables, and they lock these receivables as collateral in a credit operation, right? So the architecture of Kona is super interesting because you can really see like, a bunch of Polkadot concepts here, right? So you have Tansy here that's orchestrating the block production of Kona, right? This is Kona chain. And then and that's all only uniquely enabled by the XCMP and the Polkadot infrastructure, right? But then Kona is a multi-chain thing, right? So they are very focused in institutions. So let's say if they close a deal with, I don't know, JP Morgan, and the JP Morgan say, oh, yeah, nice, but I only work with Avalanche. That's fine. I mean, they can just use Moonbeam and leverage a super cool feature of Moonbeam called Moonbeam Router Liquidity, and then they can connect through wormhole to other ecosystems as well. So that we call that the connected contracts architecture, right? So Kona has not only their chain, but also they have a bunch of smart contracts deployed in all these environments, but they pretty much make their own chain as their back office. So they reconcile all the positions and everything in their own chain, but also accessing a bunch of different environments. This is also another super cool use case. Maybe you guys know these guys, the Greatscape. So the Greatscape is a game, right? But they have a very, very unique, a very special condition. They are very intensive in on-chain components, right? So they came to us and say, hey guys, maybe we could deploy our own chain in order to offload these on-chain components to your chain. That's good, right? Because they still can meet their users. And by the way, they start in Moonbeam, right? So all their users are in Moonbeam. So their users are still in Moonbeam. But using XCMP calls, they connect this to their own, the user base to their own chain. And then they can make it cheaper in the end of the day, to the user to play the game, right? So they avoid spikes in gas fee because it's a bunch of demand on the Moonbeam side. No, now all this demand is reflected in their own chain, so it saves a lot of cost for the user, and of course, like it's better for the community in general. Elastic also, maybe you guys heard about this project. They're pretty much known in the community these days. And Elastic is a super cool use case as well, because as you might know, they are creating this secondary marketplace for block space, right? But cool, I mean, once I bought my block space, what do I do with that, right? So the idea of this project here, and we are testing this idea actually, is, okay, maybe we could have like a vertical integration in a way that once a chain buy block space, they can register transactions and execute these transactions and create blocks and everything using Tansy orchestration layer, right? So that's a super cool use case as well. So if we could summarize everything, right, the things we were talking, and I want to leave some room for questions as well. There's a very big heavy lift, right, to put your chain together and everything. So Tansy is solving that because we are leveraging our shared collator set, right? So in the Ethereum terminology, it's more or less like a shared sequencer set. But this shared collator set, they are pretty much like rotating. So there's a set of collators. These collators are chosen from time to time, and they rotate through all the chains that we orchestrate, right? So nothing guarantees that once given collator is going to be producing blocks on behalf of one chain in a given time, right? It's always rotating and optimizing for security. So we take care of this heavy lift in the infrastructure side. And that's another super cool thing about Tansy is that doesn't mean to be an eternal symbiosis, right? So you can leverage this infrastructure, you can spin up your chain, you can put the chain live, running, put your product live. But at some point, if you want to emancipate, if you want to create your own infrastructure, that's fine. You can do it, and you can plug it again in the future, and it's super super flexible infrastructure. But essentially, we take care of this heavy lift of the infrastructure. Then, of course, we leverage the relay chain of Polkadot to provide interoperability and make the life easier in that sense. And we also work with precompiled templates, right? So we offer substrate templates, and we also offer the EVM templates, EVM-compatible templates. Actually, the EVM-compatible template is super interesting because it's pretty much you launching your own version of your Moonbeam, But instead of Glimmer as a base token, you have your own token, which is super interesting. So you can offer MetaMask to your final users. The team can code in Solidity and deploy smart contracts on top of this chain, as it was in Moonbeam, but having dedicated block space, having all the customizability that an Appchain provides. So that's super powerful, actually. And of course, the result of all of that is that you reduce the time to market brutally. A little bit about the competitive landscape. So I'm not going into details here because a bunch of teams, a bunch of approaches, a bunch of differences, but maybe talking a little bit about rollups, right? So that's the question that I get most, how does Tansy compare to rollups? How does Appchain compare to rollups, right? So when we are talking about Tansy, we should never forget that you are talking about your own layer one, right? So your own self-sovereign layer one. And that's very different to rollups, right? So if you take Optimism as an example, okay, it's super easy and fast and cheap to settle the transactions in the layer 2, but there's a dispute period after that, right? So imagine that you're building a DeFi application and you are using a settled transaction as collateral to another transaction, another credit operation or something like that. So if you don't wait for this period, the dispute period, you never can consider the transaction actually settled, right? Whereas in Polkadot, we have this 6-second block finality, and soon it's going to be even faster, right? So potentially. So the idea here is that for DeFi applications, it's super interesting because you have fast finality, very fast finality, And when it settles, it settles. You can consider this transaction settled, and you can use it however you want. A good example of that, if you're not following, is when you move some optimism or some token based in OP stack to an exchange, right? The exchange only allows you to sell it after a certain period, right? And that's exactly because of this dispute period, right? So the transaction is only considered settled after this period. So this is the main difference, I would say. Of course, customizability is a big one, but that's a very broad term. So rollups are just not customizable, whereas app chains are fully customizable. You can have your own token, as I said, but also you can have even a gasless chain if you want. You can configure certain transactions to be gasless. So it's fully flexible, fully customizable, and yeah, I would say these are the main advantages and difference in advantages comparing to this regular Ethereum setup. So this is the team, part of them at least. We have a bunch of known advisors as well, super grateful, they're being very supportive since day zero. And yeah, this is part of the team. The team is growing very fast, actually. Yeah, so extending the reach, right? So the idea, as I said, we really want to provide app chains, right? Being meeting our demand, doesn't matter where it is, leveraging bridges, GMPs to make it, connected to other ecosystems as much as we can. And yeah, I think that there's no doubt that, we can benefit a lot from connecting to these other ecosystems, bringing new users, bringing liquidity and everything. Talking a little bit about the Let's Forking Dance. If you guys are not participating yet, I strongly recommend you to. So Let's Forking Dance is our incentivized testnet campaign. So it's super interesting. You already have over 40 projects participating in that. So the campaign is going to lead to an airdrop in the future. And the way it works, it's divided in 3 tracks, right? So if you think about Tansy, another way to define Tansy, right? So Tansy is a protocol, like a messaging protocol that connects projects that have transactions and need to settle and register those transactions to the block producers, right? So it's very natural to think that all these stakeholders should be reflected in our campaign. So we have 3 tracks for the campaign. One is for block producers. The second one is for general community. And of course, we have also a builders track. So if you guys are building a project and you want to participate here, there's room. So we can, as I said, we have already over 40 projects participating in that. And the way it works is that they deploy their applications, they connect a UI to this application, deploy their chain, and connect all of that. And then when users interact there, if they play games or if they make some operations, whatever it is, the user makes points, but also the builders, they do. So they're going to be eligible to the airdrop in the future. So don't miss a chance to check it out. And that's it. This is our QR code. Join our community if you didn't yet. And that's it. I don't know. I would like to open for some questions if you have.
Any question? Yes.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the execution. So you said that you help to orchestrate the deployment. So do the parachains then choose, do they have to pay for the core time? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because another question that I always receive is Tansy a RaaS provider, right? And that there are some similarities, but the key thing that differentiates us between the 50, 100 RaaS providers that are out there is that Tansy was always meant to be a protocol, right? So our business model is pretty much based on our token. And actually, that's why we need a token. As I said, we are this messaging protocol that unites block producers and teams that need to produce blocks, right? And the better way to align interests is to, having a token there, right? So Tansy doesn't work like, you pay us $100,000, I don't know, and we put your chain up and running. It's not like this. In the future, we really desire our experience to be like, today, if you want to deploy a smart contract in Ethereum, for instance, you go to an exchange, you buy your Ethereum, you move to your wallet, and then you are able to deploy smart contracts, right? So we do want to provide the same experience, but with chains. So you deploy your own layer 1 by just purchasing, having 10C tokens, and then you are able to connect your wallet to our dApp. It's a codeless solution. You just give some very simple parameters like the name of the token, the amount of decimals, if that's an EVM-compatible chain or a substrate-native chain. Next, 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 boom. 10 minutes, your chain is up, running. This chain already has the connectivity to block explorers, indexers, RPC endpoints. A bunch of tooling is already there integrated. And then you pay for block production using our token. And of course, there is a part of the cost that's a DOT component to finalize the blocks. So answering your question at the end.
Any other question? No more question. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Thiago.
you. Thank you, guys.